I didn't question the rent at first. That's the thing about trust. It softens numbers until they feel reasonable. When my parents told me the house still had a complicated mortgage and asked me to help by paying rent, I believed them. I was 23, freshly graduated, exhausted, and eager to do the right thing. They said it would be temporary. They always say that. The house was the same one I grew up in. White siding that needed repainting. A wide porch where my mother kept potted plants. An oak tree in the yard that dropped acorns every fall. It didn't look like a house in trouble. It looked like stability. My parents talked about interest rates and refinancing delays, about banks moving slowly and paperwork getting lost. They talked the way adults do when they want you to stop asking questions. They charged me $2,100 a month. My father said it covered my room, utilities, and my share of the mortgage. My mother added that it helped them sleep at night knowing they weren't a burden. I transferred the money on the first of every month. No lease, no receipts, just trust. At first it felt fair. I had a job. I wasn't paying student loans yet. I told myself I was lucky to have a roof and family dinners and a place that still felt like home. When friends talked about roommates and rising rents, I nodded and kept quiet about the number I paid. I didn't want to sound ungrateful. Years went by quietly. I got promoted, then promoted again. I watched coworkers travel and buy cars and talk about down payments. I stayed. I saved, or at least I thought I was saving. Whenever I asked how much longer the mortgage would last, my mother sighed and said banks never give straight answers. My father said real estate was complicated. He said it with a smile that suggested I wouldn't understand anyway. Sometimes I noticed things that didn't fit. New appliances appeared without explanation. The driveway got repaved. My parents took weekend trips they never mentioned until after they came back. When I asked, my mother said they had finally negotiated a lower rate. "See," she said, "your help is working." So I kept paying. 9 years, 108 transfers, $230,000. I found out by accident. I wasn't looking for the truth. I was trying to buy my own place. My lender was polite, efficient, careful. He reviewed my income and nodded approvingly. Then he paused. He asked about the rent I paid to my parents. I explained the mortgage. He frowned at his screen. "There's something odd here," he said. "Public records show the property as owned free and clear." I laughed. I actually laughed. I said there must be a mistake. He suggested gently that mistakes were rare. He suggested I speak with a forensic accountant, just to be sure everything was clean before moving forward. I didn't tell my parents. I told myself it was routine. The accountant's office was quiet and unadorned. He asked me for bank statements, emails, texts. He didn't interrupt while I explained. He didn't need to. He typed, clicked, cross-checked. After an hour, he leaned back and spoke slowly, the way people do when they're about to change your life without intending to. There was no mortgage. Not recently. Not remotely. The house had been paid off 11 years earlier. No liens, no refinances, no hardship filings. Nothing that matched the story I'd been told. What there were, however, were deposits. My deposits. Every month, categorized as rental income on my parents' tax returns. Cleanly reported. Carefully labeled. Claimed year after year. $230,417.86. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs, something steady and sharp. Betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it crystallizes. I drove home and made dinner like always. I smiled at the table. I paid 1 more month's rent. I thanked my mother for dessert. I listened to my father complain about property taxes. I slept under the same roof where they had raised me, knowing it had never been in danger. The accountant advised patience, documentation, silence. He explained words I had never thought would apply to my family. Fraud, misrepresentation, unjust enrichment. He explained that intent mattered, and that intent could be proven. He asked if I was willing to let him handle the next step. I said yes. We built a timeline. Bank transfers aligned with tax filings. Emails where my parents referenced the mortgage. Texts where they apologized for how tight things were. We recorded a conversation where my father repeated the lie, calmly, confidently. Each piece fit together with a precision that made me nauseous. I didn't confront them. I let the truth gather weight. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't in the room, but I could hear the muffled panic through the wall. The accountant introduced himself. He explained his role. He explained what he had found. He asked simple questions with complicated consequences. My father's voice rose, then cracked. My mother cried, loud and desperate. Not for me, for themselves. They hadn't just lied to their daughter. They had created a paper trail that reached into places they couldn't talk their way out of. They called me into the room afterward. My mother grabbed my hands and begged me to understand. She said they meant to tell me. She said it started small. She said they were afraid of losing control. My father said they had given me everything growing up and didn't think this counted the same way. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. They settled before it went to court. Full repayment, interest, penalties, amended tax returns, a written admission of misrepresentation. The numbers were precise. The consequences were not negotiable. They asked for forgiveness. They asked for time. They asked if we could keep things the same for a little while longer. I asked them to move out. The house went on the market 3 months later. I moved into a small apartment while I searched for my own place. For the first time in years, my bank balance began to make sense. I slept without the hum of obligation. I cooked for myself. I learned how quiet peace can be. I bought a home the following spring. It had big windows and light floors, and no history attached to guilt. I signed papers that named only me. I unlocked the door, knowing every dollar that paid for it had been given freely. We don't talk much now. Not because I'm angry. Anger burns out. This didn't. Trust, once audited, never balances the same again. There are conversations you can't unhear. Numbers you can't unsee. People think revenge has to be loud. They imagine shouting matches and slammed doors. Mine was precise. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the truth. I let professionals do what emotions couldn't. I let the numbers speak. And when they finally did, my parents had nothing left to say. After everything settled, people expected me to feel victorious. Like there would be a moment where I stood taller, breathed deeper, smiled wider. But revenge doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like clarity. I replayed my childhood differently after that. Small moments resurfaced with sharper edges. My mother insisting I keep my first paycheck in the family account for safety. My father discouraging me from moving out earlier because rent is throwing money away. The way money was always discussed like a tool for control, never freedom. I hadn't seen it then because love can blur patterns into comfort. When the repayment hit my account, the number felt unreal. Not because it was large, but because it represented years of my life I couldn't get back. Missed trips, delayed plans, relationships I kept on hold because I was helping my parents. I stared at the balance for a long time before I moved any of it. Part of me needed to believe it was real. Friends asked why I didn't cut them off completely. They wanted a clean ending, a dramatic line in the sand. I told them some endings aren't dramatic. They're quiet, their boundaries reinforced by silence. My parents still send messages on holidays. Carefully worded, polite, afraid. I reply when I'm ready. Sometimes I don't. What changed most wasn't my relationship with them. It was my relationship with myself. I stopped explaining my choices. I stopped apologizing for asking questions. I read contracts slowly. I ask for documentation. I trust, but I verify. Not because I'm bitter, but because I'm awake. Every now and then, I think about how easily it could have continued. How many more years I might have paid without ever knowing. How many people live their entire lives under financial lies disguised as family duty. Love should never require blindness. Help should never demand silence. I keep the accountant's first report in a folder at home, not out of anger, as a reminder. Numbers don't lie. People do. And when the truth finally shows up, it doesn't knock loudly. It waits until you're ready to open the door. I was ready. Time passed in ordinary ways after that. Work deadlines, grocery runs, quiet evenings where nothing dramatic happened, and that was the point. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It showed up in small, almost unnoticeable moments. The first time my car needed repairs, I didn't panic. I paid the bill and drove home without calling anyone for permission or reassurance. The first time I booked a vacation, I didn't calculate how many months of rent it would equal. I chose a place because I wanted to see it. That alone felt rebellious. My parents tried, in subtle ways, to rewrite the story. They framed it as a misunderstanding, as a family matter that should have stayed private. My mother once said, "We never thought you'd take it that far." I understood then that they weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were shocked that I'd noticed. I stopped correcting them. I stopped defending myself. The truth didn't need my help anymore. It existed in records, in filings, in amended returns stamped and processed. It existed in the house that no longer belonged to them. Sometimes guilt tried to creep back in. Late at night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. If family was supposed to mean enduring anything. Then I remembered the calm way they lied to me for nearly a decade. The ease of it. The consistency. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Repeated monthly. The hardest part wasn't losing my parents as I thought they were. It was accepting that love without respect isn't love at all. It's leverage. Once I named that, the weight lifted. I learned to talk about money without shame, to ask direct questions, to say no without offering explanations wrapped in apologies. Power didn't come from getting the money back. It came from understanding that my life was never meant to be collateral. People sometimes ask me how I knew when to stop trusting and start acting. I tell them it wasn't a moment. It was a pattern, and patterns don't break unless someone is willing to interrupt them. Now, when I walk through my home at night and turn off the lights, there's a quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with revenge. It's the sound of independence settling in, of truth, finally having room to breathe. I didn't lose a family that day. I lost an illusion. The silence between us stretched into something permanent. Not hostile, not dramatic, just distant. And in that distance, I began to see how much of my life had been shaped by fear I didn't know I was carrying. I used to measure my worth by how useful I was, how much I could give without asking back. That belief didn't come from nowhere. It was trained into me, slowly, wrapped in praise. You're the responsible one. We're so lucky to have you. Words that sound like love until you realize they're also expectations. Once the money stopped, the praise stopped too. That's when I understood the transaction had always been there, even when it wasn't spoken out loud. I started therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted to stay unbroken. I talked about boundaries, about obligation, about how easily responsibility turns into control when no one questions it. My therapist said something that stayed with me. People who benefit from your silence will always call your voice a betrayal. That sentence explained everything. My parents never apologized for the lie itself, only for the consequences. They mourned the comfort they lost, not the trust they destroyed. Watching that from a distance hurt less than pretending it didn't exist. I built new traditions, quiet holidays, chosen family, friends who celebrated my independence instead of resenting it. I learned that family can be people who don't need anything from you except honesty. Every now and then, someone hears my story and says they could never do what I did, that they'd rather not know. I understand that fear. Knowing changes things, but not knowing costs more in the long run. The house I live in now doesn't hold my childhood memories. It holds my future. Every payment I make goes toward something real, something honest, something that won't collapse when the numbers are checked. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because it happens quietly, behind closed doors, in families that look normal from the outside. Because sometimes the most damaging betrayals don't feel cruel at all. They feel reasonable, familiar, almost loving, until the truth finally asks to be counted. The strangest part is how normal everything looks now from the outside. If you saw my parents at the grocery store or church, you'd never guess what happened. If you saw me at work or walking my dog in the evenings, you wouldn't see a survivor or a victor. You'd just see someone living her life. That's how most stories like this end. Not with a headline, with quiet adjustments. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped bracing myself before opening bank statements. Money became neutral again. Neither a weapon nor a secret, just a tool. That alone felt like freedom. There are still moments when I catch myself hesitating before spending on something joyful. A nice dinner, a spontaneous weekend away. Old habits linger. But now, when they surface, I recognize them for what they are. Echoes of a life where permission had to be earned. My parents reached out once more, a year later, not to ask for money, to ask for normalcy, to pretend time had softened the edges enough to start over without acknowledgement. I declined politely. Healing doesn't mean erasing reality. It means refusing to lie to yourself ever again. I don't hate them. Hate keeps you tied to the past. I don't need that. What I have instead is distance, clarity, and a life built on numbers that add up. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not about revenge or even justice. It's about awareness. About understanding that love should never require you to surrender your autonomy. That support should never be disguised as obligation. I trusted the people who raised me. I paid for that trust in more ways than one. But in the end, I reclaimed something far more valuable than money. I reclaimed authorship over my own life. And once you have that, no one can ever charge you rent for existing again. Even now, I sometimes wonder who I would have been if I had known earlier. Not in a regretful way, just with curiosity. How many choices were shaped by a lie I never agreed to? How many versions of my life quietly expired because I believed responsibility meant sacrifice without limits? But I don't dwell there. Dwelling keeps you trapped in hypotheticals. I live in what is a life that finally feels proportionate. Effort matches reward. Giving has consent. Help has boundaries. I no longer confuse endurance with virtue. I've noticed something else too. When you stop being exploitable, certain people lose interest. Conversations shorten. Invitations fade. Concern evaporates. At first, that hurts. Then it clarifies. You begin to see who valued you for who you were, and who valued you for what you provided. That knowledge is sharp, but it's clean. I've shared this story with very few people in my real life. Not because I'm ashamed, but because not everyone deserves access to your truth. Some stories aren't meant to be consumed. They're meant to protect you. Still, when I do tell it, there's often a long pause on the other side. Then someone quietly says, "Something like that is happening to me." And I know why this story matters. Not as entertainment, as recognition. Financial betrayal inside families thrives on silence, on the idea that questioning is disrespect, that asking for proof is disloyal, that love means compliance. It doesn't. It never did. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped participating in a lie. The damage was already there. I just turned on the lights. If there's one thing I wish someone had told me earlier, it's this. You are allowed to audit the stories you were handed. You are allowed to ask where the money goes, where the truth bends, where you keep shrinking to make others comfortable. Because the moment you stop shrinking, the math changes. And when the math finally changes, so does everything else. Since then, life has settled into a quiet rhythm I never knew I needed. Mornings with sunlight spilling across my kitchen, evenings spent reading or cooking without guilt, weekends where I travel simply because I want to, not because I owe anyone anything. It's ordinary, almost mundane, and that's exactly why it feels extraordinary. I've learned to trust cautiously, but more importantly, I've learned to trust myself. Every choice, every dollar, every boundary I set now belongs entirely to me. No one can rewrite my story, claim my effort, or charge me for living in my own life. The house is gone, the money is accounted for, and my parents? They exist on the periphery now, reminders of what I survived and how far I've come. There's no hatred left, only calm clarity, a quiet confidence that comes from finally being the author of your own life. I didn't need dramatic confrontations or theatrical revenge. I just needed the truth. And when I followed it, it carried me into a freedom I didn't even know I was missing. And in that freedom, I finally found peace.